In a world where the boundaries between reality and nightmare blur, where every shadow hides a secret and every whisper carries a warning, one channel dares to venture into the unknown. These are Scary Stories Unleashed, your gateway to the unexplained and frightening outer world. From chilling urban legends to true stories that send shivers down your spine, we bring the darkness to light. But beware, once you enter, there is no turning back. The horror you will witness here will haunt your dreams and your reality. Subscribe now and join us on a journey to the abyss. Press the bell icon so you don't miss any descent into darkness. Because here in Scary Stories Unleashed, the fears never end. At the time, I was staying at my grandparents' old house, located in a quiet rural area. The house was large and full of memories, but it also had that eerie atmosphere that sometimes made you feel like you weren't alone. My grandparents were on vacation, and I had agreed to stay at the house to take care of the place and keep an eye on things. One evening, I decided to spend some time in the kitchen washing dishes after dinner. It was quiet, with only the sound of running water and the wind rustling the trees outside the window. I was lost in my thoughts when suddenly I felt a strange sensation, as if someone was watching me. I stopped washing and slowly lifted my head, trying to see if there was something or someone else in the room with me. Then in the blink of an eye, I saw it. There was a face pressed against the kitchen window, staring directly at me. It was the face of a man with wild, unkempt hair, wide eyes, and a sinister smile plastered across his face. It felt as if time had stopped in that moment. I screamed in terror and dropped the plate I was holding, which shattered loudly on the floor. I ran to the living room where my phone was and called the police with trembling fingers. As I was talking to them, I could hear faint scratching sounds on the window, as if the man was trying to open it. I gave the police all the details and they promised to come as quickly as possible. While I waited, I closed all the curtains and turned off the lights, trying to make him think I was no longer in the kitchen. But I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes were still staring at me through the walls. When the police arrived, they searched the entire house and the garden, but they found no trace of the man. The window where I had seen the face was on the second floor, and there was no ladder or anything he could have used to reach it. The officers suggested it might have been a reflection or a trick of the light, but I was certain of what I had seen. The sinister smile, the wide eyes, it was all real. After that incident, I couldn't sleep easily. I would wake up in the middle of the night and check the windows over and over, afraid I might see him again. I even started hearing scratching sounds on the windows at night, even though I knew they were tightly shut. In the end, I decided to leave the house before my grandparents returned from their vacation. I didn't tell them all the details, but I mentioned that I hadn't felt safe there. To this day, whenever I remember that night, I feel the same terror filling my heart. I wonder, who was that man? How did he reach the window? And why was he staring at me with that sinister smile?
I was around 14 or 15 years old, and I was home alone one afternoon. I was enjoying my freedom since my parents had taken my younger brother to an all-day event, leaving me behind. I had the whole house to myself, and I enjoyed it more than I probably should have. I had only been left home alone a handful of times before, and I was used to having my family around, so this felt like a small taste of independence. I was bored, and one of my friends was having people over, so I decided to swing by. My parents had specifically told me not to leave the house while they were gone, but I didn't think much of it at the time and didn't listen. I grabbed my jacket, threw on my shoes, and headed out. Looking back, I can't believe how careless I was. I didn't lock the door when I left, which in hindsight seems like an obvious thing to do, but I was too excited to see my friends, and locking up wasn't on my mind at all. I was out for a few hours, and when I came back, I knew I had messed up big time. When I walked into the kitchen, I saw that the cabinets were open and stuff on the counters and table had been messed around. I started calling out, "Hello?" hoping that whoever had come inside was gone by now. I didn't hear a response, so I began looking around the living room and kitchen to see if anything was missing. Just as I was about to head upstairs to check, the home phone rang. It was an unknown number. I stared at the screen for a second, unsure whether to pick up. Maybe it was just a spam call or some telemarketer, but I answered it anyway. On the other end of the phone was just deep, heavy breathing. After a few seconds of breathing, I said, "Hello? Who's this?" Once again, I asked who was on the other end, and in the middle of my sentence, I was cut off by the voice on the other end, which said, "I'm in the house." I tried to play it off, hoping it was just a prank call, but I responded by lying and saying that I was home with my family and there wasn't anybody in the house. The voice on the other end responded and said, "We both know that's a lie," then abruptly hung up the phone. Next, I heard a quiet creaking from upstairs. I once again yelled out, "Hello," and I heard whoever was upstairs pick up the pace. The footsteps ran down the hallway toward the stairs where I was standing. I was worried that they were coming for me now, so I went through the back door and bolted toward the woods behind the house. I knew I had to get as far away as possible. I didn't stop running until I got to a neighbor's house, who let me use their phone to call the cops. When the police arrived, they found the door wide open, just like I had left it when I ran. They didn't find anyone in the house, but they did tell me that it seemed like someone had been there. Obviously, whoever had broken into my house and potentially wanted to hurt me got away. I refused to be left home alone for many years after that day. This happened over a decade ago, back when I was in my final years of high school. I was home alone one weekend, as my parents were attending a wedding out of town and staying overnight at a hotel. My older brother, who worked the night shift, was also gone. At the time, we lived in a rough neighborhood on the East Coast, a place where the crime rate was high and strange occurrences weren't uncommon. That weekend, I was excited to have the house to myself. My plan was simple: invite a couple of friends over, play PlayStation on the big screen TV, order some late-night takeout, probably pizza or Chinese food, and binge-watch movies until the early hours of the morning. My trusty companion, Max, our elderly beetle, would be by my side the whole time, lounging on the couch like he always did. Max had been part of our family for about 8 years. He was a calm, quiet dog who spent most of his days sleeping or begging for scraps of food. Unlike most beagles, Max rarely barked or howled. He was more of a gentle soul, content to rest his head on your lap and stay there for hours. Around 1 a.m., I was sprawled on the couch, half asleep after finishing the last slice of pizza, when I heard a loud thud from the back alley. I didn't think much of it. Living in the city, you get used to random noises at night. But Max, who had been dozing on my lap, suddenly jerked his head up. His ears perked, and the fur along his back bristled. He was usually a bit nervous, so I patted his head to calm him down and tried to relax again. Less than 2 minutes later, another bang echoed through the house. This time, Max did something I'd never seen him do before. He leaped off the couch with surprising speed and bolted toward the basement door, barking and growling like a guard dog. His deep, guttural growls were so unlike his usual quiet demeanor that it sent a chill down my spine. Through Max's frantic barking, I could hear a persistent banging noise coming from the basement. There was an old, rusted door down there that led to the back alley. It was rarely used and difficult to open, even with a key. My stomach dropped as I realized someone was trying to break in.
Living in a bad neighborhood, I'd learned a thing or two about break-ins. If someone tries a door, finds it locked, and moves on, they're probably after your stuff. But if they keep trying despite the lock, they might be after something or someone more valuable. My heart racing, I sprinted upstairs to grab the metal bat I kept under my bed for emergencies. I probably should have called the cops or run to a neighbor's house, but I was a stubborn teenager with something to prove. Armed with the bat, I crept back downstairs, my hands trembling. As I reached the basement stairs, Max darted past me, still barking furiously. Then from the other side of the door, I heard a man's voice mutter a string of curses. The banging stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of footsteps retreating down the alley. Max's aggressive barking must have scared the intruder off. I stood there frozen, clutching the bat as Max finally quieted down. My adrenaline was still pumping, but I didn't call the police or tell anyone what had happened. Looking back, That was probably the dumbest decision I could have made. Instead, I spent the rest of the night sitting on the couch with Max by my side, the bat resting across my lap. When my brother came home the next morning, I told him everything. We went down to the basement to inspect the door. When we tried to open it, the entire door fell off its hinges. The intruder had been one good shove away from getting inside. If it hadn't been for Max, things could have ended very differently. People often dismissed Max's actions as just a dog doing its job, but I knew better. Max had never barked like that before, and he'd certainly never moved so quickly. It was as if he sensed the danger, as if he knew the door wouldn't hold much longer. That night, my fat, lazy old beagle became a hero. He might have saved my life, and I'll never forget the way he sprang into action when it mattered most. Max passed away a few years later, but his bravery that night will always stay with me.